What are the best and worst things about Regina, Saskatchewan? Check out this week's episode of the Saskatchewan Real Estate Podcast as we sit down with realtor Brandon Kayter and explore the topic of the 5 pros and cons of Regina.
This is the Saskatchewan Real Estate Podcast, the show that highlights Saskatchewan real estate. Looking to buy your first house, your next investment property? Subscribe to never miss an episode. Here's your host, Ron Caroni.
Hello and welcome back to the Saskatchewan Real Estate Podcast, the podcast where we touch on all things Saskatchewan real estate. And today we're touching on the second biggest city in the province, Regina, and the 5 pros and cons of each. And to help us expand upon this topic, we have realtor Brandon Kayter, born and bred from Regina. Brandon, first off, thanks so much for joining us today.
No, absolutely. Thanks for having me. I guess I'll just kind of correct you there. I'm not originally from Regina. I actually grew up in rural Saskatchewan. So I grew up in a community of about 250 people. Small town boy, but I reside now just outside of Regina in Pilot Butte. And I'm a Regina realtor, and I kind of pride myself around what Regina and surrounding area has to offer.
Fantastic. Well, we really look forward to kind of picking your brain on this, Brandon. So we're going to get right into it. The 5 pros and cons. Let's start with the pros of Regina. We'll go for more of the positive spin. What do we have at number 1 of the one pro that makes Regina a really great place?
Absolutely. And I mean, I think you just have to start off with affordability. If you look across all of Canada, there's larger centers, and Regina and Saskatoon, but Saskatchewan as a whole is just going to be more affordable for a family and housing. And that comes down to housing. And then you look into Regina's public transit as well. It's affordable as well. So just the overall experience of living in Regina is going to be a little bit more easy for a family to settle down here.
My favorite thing to do is to go look at what a house costs in, say, like a Regina or Saskatoon, and then compare that. Even if you can find like the tiniest condo in like Toronto or Vancouver, and the amount of house that you can buy here in Saskatchewan versus those other major urban centers, we have it really good here. Coming in at pardon me, Brandon, coming in at number 2, what do we have?
Strong economy. So Regina's got a really, really strong economy, really good employment rate. So many different industries flourish around here. Obviously, agriculture is a big one for Saskatchewan as a whole, but agriculture, tech, it's a very tech savvy community with young entrepreneurial spirit. A lot of startups are happening up around here, a lot of investments. So you have the co-op refinery, Evraz, as well as, in the future, Cargill crushing plant is going to be going up and creating a lot more jobs as well. There's a lot going on, and a lot of large corporations have their headquarters here in the capital of Saskatchewan.
And that ties perfectly kind of into your previous point of, the housing is cheap. And then if that's also being coupled with these good jobs and these good economic opportunities, it does make it for a good place to work and live. Coming in at number 3, Brandon, what do we have?
You're going to get that local small feel. As it's the capital city of the province, but it is not the largest city in the province. It's, like you mentioned earlier, when you're comparing housing to, like, say, Vancouver or Toronto, those are large centers. In Regina, you're going to feel a little more knit to your community. You're going to be a little more welcomed. It's going to be easier to get around. Everything's very localized, and like we mentioned earlier, there's a large entrepreneurial spirit here in the city. So you're going to have a lot of great local small businesses, and they're going to make you feel really, really welcome when you shop local and support them and really help grow the local economy as well. So you're just going to get that small town feel in a big city. I really can't explain it any other way. You just don't find that in many places across the country.
I'm based in Saskatoon, and I think it would stay true for Saskatoon and Regina that a lot of people, you and I, both come from small towns, and then we come to the bigger city. And I think there is that feeling of small townism, because a lot of people who live in the Saskatoon or Regina are coming from these smaller communities in Saskatchewan. And would you kind of agree with that, Brandon?
100%. And for myself, I reside just outside of Regina, just in Pilot Butte. So another great community just close to the east and north end of Regina. And so many people are moving here and to the outskirts of Regina from small centers. They don't want to be in the downtown core. They want to have like the larger lots, especially out here in Pilot Butte and the suburban communities. You're going to get more bang for your buck as far as like a larger lot, and you're just going to be able to make it feel more like home if you're coming from a smaller community.
Beautiful. Coming in at number 4, what do we have, Brandon?
I got to go with outdoors and family friendly. If you're an outdoor lover and family orientated, Regina is a great place to be. There's so much to do with your family, with your kids. If you love to go to the lake, there's so many lakes within like an hour proximity. If you can head down to Fort Capel to the Chain Lakes, you got Echo Provincial Park, or you can head up to Last Mountain Lake to Regina Beach or Rowan's Ravine. So many great little resorts there. And I mean, myself, I'm a big fisherman. You and I talked about that earlier. So having these lakes so close is just such a treat. Especially the fishing is unbelievable. So if you're looking to get outdoors, head to a lake, or if you're into hiking, in the city here, we have Wascana Lake. Beautiful, especially right now. I don't know if you can tell from the shirt I'm wearing, but fall is one of my favorite times of the year. You just can't beat walking around Wascana Lake and the colors. And if you want to take a small drive out to Wascana Trails, it's about a 15-20 minute trek from North Regina, and you have some amazing hiking in the valley more towards Lumsden there. So lots to do. There's so many parks, paths. It's an outdoor lover oasis.
I always think it's kind of a shame when the only experience that other people who are not from Saskatchewan have is just the drive past on the highway. Because I do find that, if you are from Saskatchewan, you do know that there are these beautiful areas where you can easily spend, a full day just enjoying the nature that is Saskatchewan. And I think it's hard to argue with the Rocky Mountains as far as beauty, but Saskatchewan is beautiful in its own way as well. And so I love that point that there's lots of nature to take in, and whether that's a day on the lake fishing or some beautiful hikes, I really love number 4 on that side.
Absolutely.
At number 5, Brandon, what do we have for the last pro of Regina?
And so there's so many, so it was really hard to narrow them down. I could go on for a few more, but number 5, we have it's diverse and accepting. So you're going to find Regina very cultural and very artsy. You're going to have a lot of diverse cultures here, and that has a lot to do with the university as well. You have a lot more students coming over. We have so many festivals and events, much like the Mosaic. I don't know if you've heard of Mosaic, but it's an event that happens here in Regina. And it's fantastic. It's so much fun. You get to go and experience so many different cultures in over a span of 3 days, I believe it is. And there's just, there's endless opportunities if you want to get into the cultural side of it, the art side of it. We have lots of art galleries, but you're going to see there's a lot of diverse people here, and it's very accepting. No matter where you're coming from, you're going to be accepted here, and you can create a great life here as well. So check out the art galleries, check out Mosaic and some of these other festivals that Regina has to offer. Obviously, you can head to Tourism Regina website, and they have a lot of great guides, what goes on here in the city. So
yeah, great points, Brandon. And I think most people would be, surprised at the diversity of places like Saskatoon and Regina. Even speaking from a personal standpoint, my wife is from Serbia, Hungarian. We're part of the Hungarian society. And yeah, you would be just surprised at how many Hungarian families, exist here in Saskatoon and across the province. And I think not even just Hungarian, but you could expand that to French, German, East Indian. You could go on. There's a giant list of all the ethnicities and cultures that do kind of make up the fabric of these different cities. So yeah, I love that point. So enough of the positives, Brandon. Now we want to know the bad things about Regina. Let's get into the cons of the Queen City.
Yes, absolutely. And with pros, there's always going to be cons with anything, right? So number 1 on the con side of things is the crime rate. And if you look up, if you Google it, Regina comes up. It's one of the higher crime rate cities in the country. And I mean, there's not a lot more to say about it. It's an unfortunate thing. But obviously we have great people that are looking to reduce that statistic and make it a little bit safer place. I mean, that's for the most part, you're gonna be safe. So it is just something to keep in mind if you're looking to make the move to Regina.
And so even expanding upon that as a realtor, like I think sometimes when we say a statistic like that, it sounds very scary if we say, oh, I'm moving to Regina. But there's obviously places in Regina that people live and feel incredibly safe to raise their family. And I would say that that's probably indicative of something like that, right, Brandon?
100%. And there's so many great neighborhoods in the city. And for a lot of people that I know, my age and younger families looking to move, they're looking to be kind of in the east side, in the Greens and Gardner, the newer neighborhoods. And that's where you're going to find a lot of great amenities and a great lifestyle. So there's tons of great neighborhoods within the city. But with that being said, you just take into consideration that, there is a little bit higher crime rate than you might find in other cities across the country. But yeah.
Awesome. Moving on to number two.
Number two, it's inevitable, but the weather. If you're coming from, say, the East Coast or the West Coast, and you're not used to some brutally cold prairie winters, it can knock you on your feet a little bit. If it's minus 40 and with a wind chill, it's minus 54, and the wind is just blowing, and you got 3 feet of snow falling over the next few days, it can be overwhelming and can put a damper in some plans. So the weather, unfortunately we can't do anything about it, but we do get some brutally cold winters. If you're like myself, if you ice fish, you take advantage of that and you head out to the lakes or you hop on the snowmobile or go snowshoeing and just really embrace the winters.
Yeah, no doubt about it. Make sure you take advantage of the positives that come along with those negatives. And I would even, not to pit this against a Saskatoon or a Regina thing, but I would say that maybe more of a negative thing about Regina is that you do get a little bit more wind than Saskatoon. I think temperature wise, maybe Regina is a little warmer, but during the winters, I think, when you add in that wind chill, it might be a little bit more extreme in Regina, even if you compare it to like a Saskatoon.
Very much so. Yeah, we're pretty wide open as far as, you're a little bit more north, you have a little more tree protection and whatnot. Whereas down here in Regina, it's kind of just like a free for all for the wind. So you get used to it, you do. So I wouldn't let that take you away from ever, making the move to Regina just because it's cold. Because if you move to Saskatoon, it's just as cold, but maybe just not as much wind.
Totally. And moving on to number three, Brandon, what do we have?
Number three, I have nightlife. It doesn't have the vibes and the downtown atmosphere that maybe somebody coming from Vancouver or Toronto has. If you're a young professional and you're single and you're looking to go out on the town and hop around from place to place, you might be a little disappointed in Regina. And that's it's hard for me to say because I came to Regina when I was younger and I had great times. But a lot of the bars that I used to attend or, hang out with friends that have closed down in the meantime. And I think it's just something that hasn't flourished as much, whereas in Saskatoon, you might have a little bit better experience downtown.
Awesome. On to number four.
Number four is property taxes. So in Saskatchewan in general, property taxes tend to be a little bit more than larger centers in the country. But I mean, you kind of give or take. You have the affordability of housing, kind of balancing that out. So I don't expect to come to Regina and have your pockets emptied by property taxes, but definitely be aware of what it is, and when you're shopping around for houses, take it into consideration because the larger the house, the larger your property taxes and so forth. So it's just something to definitely keep in mind if you're thinking about buying a home in the Regina area.
Right. And I think something that kind of ties into that is because our winters are so much more, we'll say, brutal than the rest of the country.
Yeah.
I think that does take an effect on things like road and infrastructure. And that is very expensive to fix and maintain. And I also think that ties into things like property taxes. So it's not just that property taxes are higher for no reason. It's all just tied into running of the city.
Exactly. And like you take into consideration, like you said, the drastic changes in the weather. We had plus 30s and 40s this summer, like absolutely hot temperatures. And now they're calling for one of the coldest winters ever. So, I mean, you take that in consideration, and yeah, our roads, they take a beating. And I mean, that could almost be another con, is the construction, right? It's ongoing. It's nonstop. As soon as the snow melts and things defrost, um, it's go time for construction season, and it can be a little bit frustrating at times, but it's all part of it, and it just comes with the weather that we get.
Now, we could almost say weather again as another con for number 5, but we'll see what you have for the last con here, Brandon.
Yeah, for number 5, I put travel. So if you are a travel bug and you like getting out of here, getting away from home and taking vacations, you're not going to find the greatest flight options out of Regina. We do have an international airport, but it does seem like there's not a whole lot of great options. You're typically going to have 2 or 3 connecting flights if you're going on a far trip. So it extends the traveling. Traveling is definitely draining. And it just kind of, it's the experience, right? So if you're a big travel bug and you're going to be looking to fly lots, that's something to take into consideration, as you might be looking at trips with a couple more connecting flights here and there.
I was telling you earlier that my wife is from Serbia, and so we obviously like to do a bit of travel there. And so I think there's the odd time where she pulls my ear to say, like, we'd be closer if we're in Toronto or Calgary. But I just have such a deep love of Saskatchewan that I can't even really consider moving from here. But give us your last thoughts on Regina, Brandon, as a whole, kind of as we kind of wrap it all together here.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, there's pros and cons. I think there's pros that heavily outweigh the cons. There's so many. It was hard to narrow it down to 5. But if you are, considering moving to Regina, I would definitely, sit down and take everything into consideration from a family standpoint, a cost standpoint, and just the amenities available. There's so much to offer here. You can have a great life. There's so much opportunity for employment and growth, and just having a great life here. So if you are looking to buy, definitely take everything into consideration, and it's really a great place to live. There's no ands, ifs, or about it.
Awesome. Before we get to your contact info, Brandon, I just love to ask a question that I ask everyone who comes on the podcast. If you could give yourself a piece of free advice, what would it be? And is there a timeline of when you would have told yourself that advice?
Oh, that's a really good question. And yeah, I mean, there's a couple things I would tell my younger self. Definitely, if you are, younger, in your teens, definitely invest early. Definitely learn about it. I feel like it's something that growing up in school, we aren't really taught about financial literacy and everything like that. It's not a topic that's really discussed in depth when we're younger. And I wish I would have known a lot more that I know now when I was younger and invested earlier and had more opportunity now. With that being said, I think another great piece of advice is everyone is just very strategic about their next move. And I wish I would have said yes more. Saying yes more is something that I definitely think I would have wish I would have done. That you always consider the ifs and what ifs and the anxiety and the unknown, but saying yes and figuring out later is something that I wish I would have done a lot more of, because there's so much out there and there's so much opportunity. So just saying yes and going for whatever you wanted in life. And life's short. Life is short. That's kind of what it comes down to.
Great stuff. Awesome. If people are looking for a little bit more information on Regina, or potentially they're looking to buy and sell in the area, Brandon, how can they get in contact with you?
Yeah, absolutely. I'll fire you a link that you can put in the show notes below. But yeah, if you just Google me, Brandon Kayter Realtor, or search that on Facebook, Instagram, TikTok, any of the social networks, really, you can find me and connect with me. And we can definitely, whatever your goals are, we can definitely get you on the right track.
Awesome. And you also have a great podcast as well. You want to mention that?
Sure do. Yeah, I mean, why not? I'll plug the podcast. If you guys are into fishing, any of you listeners, I do have a fishing podcast. It's called the Weekend Warriors Fishing Podcast. And we sit down just like Ron does here with special guests from across the industry, across the world, And it's very informational, very just informative. If you're into fishing, definitely check it out. We're ranked #1 in the wilderness category in Canada for fishing podcasts right now. So it is local. It's another great thing that we do around here in Regina. And by all means, check it out. And probably see you on the water somewhere.
Yeah, sounds good, Brandon. Thank you so much for your time and your expertise on Regina. We really appreciate it.
Hey, it's my pleasure. Thanks for the invite. Always love doing this types of stuff.
Thanks to you for checking out this episode of the Saskatchewan Real Estate Podcast. If you found it informative and want to see more episodes like this, hit the subscribe button to never miss an episode and help us boost the YouTube algorithm by giving us a thumbs up. Until next week, I'm Ron Caroni, your Saskatchewan mortgage professional. Bye for now.